My good friend Tony B has talked to me over the years, and he's wanted me to do more politics. My wife wants me to do less politics. And the year I decide to do more politics, I said, okay, I'll go ahead and do a podcast on this. In the light of a kind of a Joe Rogan thing, we sit down and we talk to people about these types of things. Then all of a sudden, the new administration comes in, and suddenly I'm always like, I don't have enough to talk about. It's just been unbelievable the last couple of the last few weeks and what we've seen come out of Washington, D.C. and the impact that has had all over the world. And today we're with a really good friend of mine who I enjoy talking politics with. He is from the city of Chicago, where there's not a lot of politicking that has gone on in that city over the years. He is the executive director of Drive Forward, but he and I also know each other from 37th District politics. First meeting when I was thought of myself as a Senate candidate back in 2016. And thank goodness, Rebecca Saldana. I love Rebecca Saldana. And every time I see Senator Saldana, I thank her for spending all that time away from her family and going down to Olympia and continuing to be our senator in the 37th district. And she looks at me like Juan Cotto. But she's always doing some great things down there, and so much to have these great relationships. But Michael was also a chair of the 37th District Democrats. He's been incredibly active, helping us make sure that our drivers who are Uber drivers and different drivers in some of these rideshare operations have representation. But more important than that, it's just fun to talk politics with you. Michael, welcome to Juan on Rainier.
Hey, Juan, thanks for having me. Really appreciate that. And God, yeah, I mean, federal politics. Boring as hell until about 4 weeks ago, and then all hell broke loose.
No one was really talking about anything. It's just incredible.
Yeah,
Michael, where do you? I've always been impressed by your political acumen. You're from Chicago, which is a city very, very similar to Boston, where there is sports and there is politics.
Yep.
Tell us a little about your background. Tell us a little bit about growing up in Chicago. And for those of you who don't know, I did an internship with Chicago Cubs in 1998. And Michael,
really?
My first experience when I was an intern with the Chicago Cubs, they said, Juan, we want you to go survey the neighborhood because we're going to be doing the night games this summer, so we want to get people's feedback. And I took a little survey.
Was that the first season of night games?
That was the first season of night games.
Oh,
1998.
man.
And Michael, let me tell you something. I went and knocked on people's doors, and I
10-1 against.
Oh my goodness! and the things that they said to this young man who was coming as the former center fielder of the Western Oregon Wolves, and I was 23 years old, didn't even have beer spilt on me, and the things that these people were saying to me, and I was just thinking to myself, all we want to do is have night games.
Why would you want to ruin the tradition like that, Juan? Come on. We've got Ivy, we've got day games, we've got Wrigley Field. I mean, that's every Cubs fan's dream is being there at a day game.
One person told me, they said, something, young man, and you don't understand this, but there are going to be people walking through my yard peeing in my flowers.
I am not going to confirm or deny that would ever happen, Juan. I grew up in Chicago. At least that's what I call home.
Mm-hmm.
My dad did international banking, so we spent when I was really little, we spent about 6 years in Hong Kong, back in Chicago, and then went through high school in London. So kind of a global sort of exposure, and ended up back in Chicago after college, and it's where I met my at the time would soon to be future wife, and then spent a few years in the belly of the beast in DC, and then out here, and been out here for it's been 20 years now.
What was it's interesting. What is your attraction to? I was thinking about myself. What is your attraction to politics? I was a kid growing up here in Seattle, and I have to be honest with you. It was almost like it was free. We would watch the news at night. My father would come home. He worked at Boeing, my mother at the VA hospital. And when they had shifts that allowed them to come home and make our dinners for us, we'd have the TV set there and we would watch Como News with Ruth Walsh and people like that. As the Bob Thronson, I remember, was the anchor at the time. That would lead into the ABC Evening News with Frank Reynolds, and we would learn about these different issues. And it just seemed like that attracted me to that. And then obviously sports, because we would see those things free on television. And I'm always trying to figure out what attracts people to this I don't want to call it an industry, this public policy.
Yeah, it's funny. So I was a history major in college, right? And so, studying history, you always have to study sort of political environments and what goes on in whatever the field of study, whatever field part of history you're studying. There's always going to be politics involved. And after I graduated, I started actually working in the travel and hospitality field and did a lot of that. Ran my own travel agency, worked in hotels, a lot of travel and tourism stuff, and got involved in politics. It sort of been summer of '92, and was back for summer for college in our house in the suburbs of Chicago. My mother said, "You got to go get a job." And, I sort of said, "Yeah, okay, Ma." And, after a week or two of sitting on the couch doing nothing but eating food at home, my mother said, "If you're not going to go get a job, you're going to go down here and you're going to go volunteer for Bill Clinton." And I said, "Well, why Bill?" And my mother said, "Well, because he's going to be the next president." And I said, "Really? I mean, he's going to beat George H.W. Bush? I mean, he's pretty popular." And back then, I was at Georgetown University, so not the liberal bastion of education that some people think it is. At least it was Jesuit. So from that standpoint, a little more liberal. But, I didn't think George H.W. Bush was all that bad. I mean, his social policies sucked, but his foreign policy was okay. And, this, that, the other. And my parents were like, "Well, no, you're going down. You're going to go volunteer for Bill because he's going to be the next president. And besides, we all went to college with him." So I'm like, okay, fine. And so I go down, start volunteering on Bill's campaign, knocking on doors in the suburbs of Chicago for the '92 campaign, go back to it in the '96 campaign, do some more stuff, this time in DC. And, just learn to love that sort of get involved in being a member of your community and talking to people and doing the phone calls and knocking on the doors and all that sort of stuff. It was really exciting. But then, we were living in DC and we moved out here in 2004 and got here exactly 32 days before the 2004 Rossi Gregoire election. And we get our apartment all sorted out. We bring our lease down to King County elections to get registered to vote, so that we could vote in the presidential election that year. As we know, I mean, I know nothing about Washington state politics at that point. And, my wife, who grew up in Bellingham, knew a little bit, but not a whole lot. And we're looking at this going, "Oh, well, Rossi doesn't sound so bad, but he's a Republican." And so we pull the lever, so to speak, for Gregoire. And then a few years later, we've bought our house down here in the Rainier Valley in the Columbia City neighborhood. And, that was after my wife got followed around one too many times for being a black woman at the Safeway in Queen Anne. She said, "We need to buy a house in a neighborhood where people look like me."
Now tell me that. So she's going to Safeway and she's putting in her groceries and people are accusing her of shoplifting and following her around, or what happened there?
I mean, basically, she tells the story better than I do, but we were just picked up our kid from daycare. He was 1 at the time, maybe 1.5, And
I long for those days.
And he fell asleep in the car seat. And I was driving, so I was the one that sat in the car with him. And my wife went into the Safeway on top of Queen Anne. And the way she says it is, she was we were getting 4 things. It was like some kind of vegetable, pasta, some pasta sauce, and a 6-pack of beer. Right. That was the entire grocery list for the day. And my wife runs in, and he's in the produce aisle, and this employee comes up and asks her, "Hey, can I help you?" Sort of weird, but whatever. No, moves on.
Sure.
Picking out the pasta, the same employee is following her through the store. And she's picking out whatever the sauce is she wants. The employee asks if I can help you again. And then she gets over to the beer aisle, and the employee says to her, "I said, can I help you?" And my wife, God bless her, turns to this person and goes, "No, I have a PhD in American history. I'm pretty sure I can pick out beer myself." And she comes out, and she's just fuming as she's getting in the car, and I know something's wrong. I turn to her, "Baby, okay?" And she's like, yeah, just this person, and this whole screed comes out, about how this, that, the other, and so decided that maybe Queen Anne wasn't the neighborhood that we wanted to live in, and so we started looking around and ended up down here in Columbia City. Bought our house 20 years ago this September.
And congratulations.
Yeah.
And when I hear that type of story, people are just so, I guess at times are so shocked that something like that would happen in Seattle.
If you're watching this on YouTube, you can tell right away I'm a white guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
you are.
And I can't tell you the number of times that my wife and I have gone into, whether it's Macy's or Nordstrom or any other kind of retail outlet, and she's going over here to pick out something, I'm going over somewhere else to get something else, and we meet up, and I've already gotten my stuff, bought my stuff, paid for it, and I walk back to her, and no one's even asked her if she wanted help yet. So this idea that Seattle's this lovely liberal, anti-racist place is laughable. Seattle can be just as racist as Birmingham, Alabama. It's just disguised better.
This is Juan Cotto on Rainier with a longtime political activist, Michael Wolfe, who currently is the executive director of Drive Forward, who represents the Uber drivers and the people who bring those delicious meals to your door. Michael makes sure that they are represented at the state and at the local levels with an organization that oversees them from a political perspective. On your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, just to refresh your memory, usually at 2:00 on Tuesdays at around 3:00, you have WIAA Primetime, which is our show with my good friend Mick Hoffman, where we discuss issues in high school sports in the state of Washington. And we have we really stay away from the scores, and we stay away from the powerhouse teams. We really have an in-depth discussion on how the WIAA really impacts education and your kids, and it's a great conversation. And if you've been following the news lately, the WIAA and Mick Hoffman have been up against it on a variety of different issues stemming from the administration's perceptions of transgender athletes. And it's been fun to have that conversation with Mick Hoffman, simply because from a policy perspective and from a perspective of that organization, how they want to make sure that there is equity for all students and athletes and also activities in the state of Washington. So a very interesting show. If you want to catch that at Tuesdays at 3:00 right here on your community radio station. And then, of course, the producer of our show has a show called Fresh Juice. And let me tell you something, there's nothing better than getting up at night, checking my Facebook page and listening into Fresh Juice for a couple minutes. And Daniel Bennis and company, they've been at this for a long time. How many episodes of Fresh Juice? 737. So you can put 2 airline engines on that and fly off on a 737 with Fresh Juice. Always interesting, always fun to listen to. And you can catch that here on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Michael Wolfe, let's talk about just some of the definitions as I read through Facebook. And and the fact, I always consider you someone who is well read and is intellectual on these types of things. What is a fascist?
I mean, I don't have the textbook definition memorized, but I mean, effectively, anyone who's engaged in any kind of sort of fascist ideology is going to be looking to marginalize certain groups of people, usually minorities of one sort or another, whether it's a religious minority or a minority of a particular ethnicity or a particular, sexual orientation, gender identity, etc., who then, demeans them and belittles them to gain trust and power to be able to rule over people with some big type of authority that's unquestionable.
Is that a fair label for this current administration? I see him as a populist. I also see him as someone who doesn't really know what he is. He's just going out there being. I don't think there's a rhyme or reason to anything that he does.
I mean, okay, let's break this down. Is Donald Trump a fascist? No. Is Elon Musk and the rest of the people in Donald Trump's administration fascists? Absolutely. Donald Trump is just frankly too stupid to know he's being used and has been being used for 40 years. Simple as that. Now, does that make any of this any better? No, absolutely not. And it's if you say the same thing over and over again, people begin to believe it, right? Let's talk about immigration for a moment. All these people are coming in, they're committing all these crimes. Let's deport them. All these criminals are being deported. Well, guess what? You know what? Biden and Obama pretty much deported all of the criminals already, right? I mean, Obama deported more people than George W. Bush. Biden deported more people than Donald Trump ever did.
The numbers are astounding.
It's astounding. And the thing is, we have to understand that immigration is the bedrock of this country. My grandfather on my mother's side emigrated to the United States in 1926 from the Weimar Republic in Germany. He ended up naturalizing, fighting in World War II for the Americans in North Africa and in Europe, right? As an immigrant, right? My dad's side of the family, my great whatever grandfather came over from Ireland in 1842, right? My other grandparent on my mother's side, my great grandfather immigrated from Italy in 1889, right? Yeah. And then ended up meeting a woman from the same village, tiny village in southern Italy that he was from. They got married, had kids, whatever. The point is that immigration has been going on in this country for 250 years. We're celebrating the 250 birthday of this country this year. Immigration is going on for 250 years. Immigration is not new, right? The vilification of immigrants is also not new. My Irish ancestors, my Italian ancestors would have faced pretty tough conditions when they came in because they were the black sheep of Europe, right? And so to think that we are not looking at the history of this country and we're not looking at the benefits that immigration has brought this country, we wouldn't have the scientific output that we do have if immigration wasn't part of this country. We wouldn't be able to have the kind of business acumen and global leadership if immigration wasn't part of this country. We wouldn't have the freedoms and the ability to worship the way anyone wants to worship. And whether you're a Christian, a Catholic, a Jew, a Muslim, a Buddhist, a Hindi, any other religion, you are free to do that, whatever, and practice your religion freely. We wouldn't have that if that wasn't true if we weren't immigrants. Everyone in this country was an immigrant, with the exception of the Native Americans.
Going back to this is where I like to consider myself the radical moderate. Because I always have a radical moderate, right? You
and I might be in the same boat. One,
you have one side that argues about immigration, that we have people coming into the country, and the I mean the current president is married to an immigrant. And when she was asked about that, she said, "Yeah, I came here and I did it the proper way. I went through the proper channels to become an American citizen."
So then how do you explain Elon Musk?
How do you explain him? How do you?
Well, I mean, he was an illegal immigrant. He overstayed his student visa.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't even think I'm not. I'd have to go back and look it up, but I thought he became a citizen of Canada before he ever became a citizen of the United States, if he is even still a citizen of the United States.
Mhm.
Point being is he's broken all the rules, just like any one of these people that have come in recently that are driving Ubers, that are delivering
Sure.
your food, that are fleeing, countries where there's mass poverty, drought, war, and he, because he was white and he was rich, got the benefit of the doubt. Well, why does being white and rich mean you get the benefit of the doubt? Why can't the average Uber driver who's emigrated here from East Africa, who's maybe fled the wars in Somalia, why aren't they getting the benefit of the doubt? Because you know what? They're contributing to our economy. They're creating wealth for their family by doing this work. They're going in and putting in the hard hours and making the sacrifices to get their kids a good education, and hopefully their kids will have a better life than they did, right? But we're going to vilify those people instead. That's wrong.
What can we do to allow that person to become a United States citizen? Do we just say, something, you're here, you're paying your taxes, we're just going to call you a United States citizen?
Well, I mean, obviously, if you've entered the country illegally, I should phrase that. If you've entered the country not through an official channel, and you know what, walking up to a border agent and saying, "I want to seek asylum," is an official channel. No matter how much the Republicans don't like that, that's an official way to do things. But either way, if you want to talk about people who cross the border or show up without passports or show up without documentation or whatever you want to call it, yeah, you know what? If they're willing to work, if they're willing to pay their taxes and they are upstanding citizens, yeah, we should have a pathway to citizenship. You look at these DACA kids who came in when they were kids and no fault of their own. The parents brought them into the country. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't have any agency in this. Absolutely, they should have a pathway to citizenship.
That should be different than someone who's trying to come in through one of the points of entry. We're talking about people who specifically have been here.
Yeah. And then, anyone who comes in through a normal channel of immigration, yeah, there should absolutely be pathways to citizenship. And there are. You get your green card, then you stay here for a certain number of years and you apply for citizenship. That's what my grandfather did. That's what actually both my grandfathers did. So, it's there. It's always been there. And we just need to recognize that our economy thrives because we have an open policy of immigration. And I know that there are people on the right who look at that and go, yeah, but 100 years ago it was mostly people from Europe, and now it's all these South Americans and Africans that are coming and Asians that are coming. And, that's not really what we meant by immigration. Well, no, you don't get to pick and choose. If we are going to be a beacon of freedom and liberty for the world and a beacon of democracy for a world, then yeah, freedom movement of people. Let's allow immigration. It's only going to help our economy, and it's only going to help our country. And I'm sorry if that offends some white people out there, but you know what? Too bad.
I don't see why it should if there was a process that was in place. And obviously, I mean, I saw the conservative economist Thomas Sowell say one time, hey, if we're talking about a bunch of people who are going to go to Berkeley, and he was teaching at Stanford at the time, but he said, if you're talking about a bunch of immigrants that are coming to the country and they end up going to the University of California, Berkeley, we need to get rid of them as soon as possible. If they're coming to Stanford, we should let them in. I think he was making a joke about that. I think that was a joke, but out of the abstract, I get that assessment, I guess. But the bottom line issue is, why has it taken so long to come up with an acceptable form of policy which would allow for what you're describing?
Well, I think part of the problem is what's the goal of immigration from a policy standpoint, right? is the goal of immigration from a policy standpoint to attract people who are going to be what one might call a productive member of society, or is the goal of immigration to just allow almost anyone here to, quote, live the American dream, right? And I think that there's a balance here, because a lot of people who've come into the country illegally are working jobs that, frankly, most American U.S. citizens aren't taking, right? Whether that's agricultural work, whether that's hotel housekeeping type work, whether that's,
a lot of cases driving cars,
right? You look at all that and you say, well, these jobs need to be filled. Well, how can we then incentivize immigration of people who are not only fill those jobs, but also incentivize immigration of people who are global leaders in whatever field of science they're studying, or global leaders in any field, right? Whether it's science, academics, math, whatever. We need to be able to figure out a system that works for it. And the current system doesn't do that at all. The current system is based completely on country of origin and quotas. That doesn't help. So immigration reform needs to happen. And we need to give up this idea that, we can only let so many Europeans in, so many Africans in, so many Asians in. It should no longer be about where you're from, but what you're bringing to the country, right? And I think that'd be a much more equitable way of doing it. It also would allow for a variety of people with different skills to be able to come into the country. And then anyone else who wishes to immigrate to the United States for whatever reason, we need to have a clear pathway for that too.
Michael, one of the things that's troubling to me, and I assume it's troubling to you also, and you touched on it earlier, is the use of rhetoric. What is right is what is wrong. I also hear you hear so many different things. I mean, the liberals and the Democrats want all these people coming into the country because those people are going to vote Democrat. And Governor Newsom, he's not, he's allowing for people to go ahead and vote, and they don't even have to be citizens. They're immigrants. They just show up. They just show who their name is, and they can vote. And they believe that just these different things in terms of rhetoric, and I think that lends to the point where sometimes we get into these conversations, and to be fair, there's simplistic arguments also from the liberal perspective as well, but the bottom line issue is that the rhetoric. We are going to come back. We'll come back and we'll get into this a little bit more on the immigration issue. Not that we are only going to talk about immigration. We'll talk about other issues that are coming out here in the city of Seattle as well, where Michael is very, very well versed on some of our issues on Juan on Rainier on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Rainier Avenue Radio, your community radio station will provide you with more information. Rainier Avenue Radio.
So my doctor told me to go online to check my test results, but I didn't know how to do that. Thankfully, I could turn to Link to Care WA for help. With Link to Care WA, I was able to learn how to use online health portals, use telehealth to talk to my doctor virtually, and manage my prescriptions online. I called the hotline and spoke to a real person who taught me the skills I needed. Call Link to Care WA at 866-757-1832 or visit linktocarewa.org.
Hey y'all, it's Traffic Jam with Kareem.
Thursday at 4 p.m.
Hey, Traffic Jam. Rainier Avenue Radio, download the app so you don't miss out what's popping on Crackers Channel. It's your boy, Cream the Dream, on another beautiful week on here on Traffic Jam in Seattle. I hope you guys doing what you're supposed to do, being you're supposed to be. I got a good show for y'all, a lot to talk about. Kareem the Dream, keep up with everything.
Get your entertainment news with Kareem on the Traffic Jam, Thursday at 4 p.m. Hey, Seattle, tune in to Lidline Sports every Monday, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m.
What up, yo? We are back. This is Pep and the man that don't take no mess, Mr. O.P.I.S., Mr. Stevenson. What say you?
I hope you see the hat that I'm wearing right now. That's how mad I am.
I do. Man, you are angry.
I just want to make that be known. I just want to make that be known.
Tune in to Lidline Sports every Monday, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Deadline Sports.
This is a Rainier Avenue radio message on fentanyl awareness in our communities.
Sought out Percocet and from the street dealer, and it was 100% fentanyl, and it instantly killed him.
You've seen young people trying drugs for the first time without realizing there's fentanyl in their drugs, overdose. I see the eyes of the people who I was not able to save. And not only have I seen people out on the streets overdose, but I have friends who have overdosed as well. I don't think people understand how all-encompassing, how fentanyl can take over somebody. They're just not themselves. They're a totally different person. And it's so addictive. They're just chasing their next high.
This has been a Rainier Avenue radio message on fentanyl in our communities.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Rainier Avenue Radio .world, the station that cares about our community. Yeah.
We are back on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio .world. We have Michael Wolfe with us this afternoon, who is a jack of all trades activist here, who is currently the executive director of Drive Forward. Michael, you've been executive director of Drive Forward for what now? About
almost 6 years.
Boy, time flies.
Yeah. Started July of 2019.
How did you fall into that position?
Well, so I, having lived in a expensive market like this for 20 years, sometimes you need a little side hustle, right? Yeah. So
don't I know it?
I was, as I said, I started my career out in travel and hospitality sector, and then when our son was young, he faced some social emotional development delays, and wife and I decided it was best that one of us be a stay-at-home parent. And she was already tried to give me the big convincing argument that, she should be the one staying home. And I just looked at her and I said, that's silly. You make more money than I do. I'm staying home. And she kind of just looked at me and said, oh, God, thank you. Because I really didn't want to do that. So became a stay-at-home dad. And then when my son started middle school, which he went to the Orchid K-8 for middle school here, just up the street, and he could walk to school. And so, I'd get him off to school, he'd walk, and then I figured I might as well use this time while he's in school and everything to try to bring a little extra money in the family. We wanted to provide some things for him that just our current income couldn't do. So I started driving rideshare, started driving Uber. It's been sort of December-ish of 2015, and just sort of fell into that part-time. It was a great gig. It was great extra money. Could do it when I needed to do, and then the Seattle City Council, in their infinite wisdom, decided that they wanted to regulate rideshare in a way that probably wasn't really good for drivers. And I want to be very clear here as I get into some of these conversations that viewpoints I'm expressing on my own. If I express viewpoints that are viewpoints of the organization that I represent for my job, I will make sure that that is well known. But, at that point, we were talking about the city forcing drivers without a vote of the drivers to accept unionization and a contract. No vote by the drivers. That is not kosher. Unions are great. Love me unions. I think they have brought so many good things to workers and the working class and society in general. We wouldn't have a 5-day work week and a 40-hour work day and overtime and sick pay and vacation time and all these things that we enjoy as employees if it wasn't for unions and the labor movement. Are they always right? No. Right? Just like anyone. Anyone can be wrong occasionally. And in this case, I thought that they weren't doing the right thing. Most Uber, as I'm pretty sure probably most of our listeners know, Uber drivers, your Lyft drivers, DoorDash delivery folk, people who drop off your groceries from Instacart, even some of the people that deliver packages to your door from Amazon are independent contractors. They are running their own business. Now, whether or not they should be is an entirely different argument. We're not going to get into that. But independent contractors legally can't form unions according to the National Labor Relations Act. This is federal law. This has always been federal law. There's nothing the city can do about it. Nothing the state can even do about it per se. Are we able to form associations, business associations? Absolutely. And that's why Drive Forward exists. We are a 501c6 nonprofit business association, which is an interesting structure, but that's what we are. And that's how we formed. And I joined up with them as an Uber driver way back in 2016, right when all the stuff with the Seattle City Council was going on, where they attempted to force all drivers to join the Teamsters. And it didn't sit well with us because we had no vote, no say. And eventually the courts ruled that the city of Seattle overstepped its jurisdiction and violated Antitrust Act because it would effectively be price fixing between independent companies, which is not allowed under the Antitrust Acts. So they went back to the drawing board, and then we got the minimum earning standard that drivers sort of enjoy, along with other protections like deactivation protections, paid sick time, etc., that are now statewide because the state's adopted some of these similar things. So if you're ever wondering why before the pandemic you get an Uber to the airport from our neighborhood for $25 and now it's 60, here's your answer. So that's sort of how I fell into it. Was a part of the Drive Forward's member advisory committee for a while, and then their original executive director left to go to grad school and apply for the job, and they gave it to me. So
what do you say the impact has been for the drivers that you've been working with and the drivers that you represent?
Well, most of our drivers will tell you that they take fewer rides these days, right? They give fewer rides these days. Most of them tell you that the money's no better than what it was prior to the pandemic. And that's because when you shift how much the cost structure is, the companies are going to pass it on to consumers. Consumers are going to end up paying more. And if they have to pay more, they're going to do it less. And if they do it less, then there's less trips. If there's less trips, there's less money. Now, because each trip is worth more money, means everyone sort of just reset the supply and demand curves and no one's making any more money. So this policy that was supposed to boost driver pay didn't do it. It's roughly even. Number of trips has fallen by roughly 40%. Number of drivers doing the work dropped by roughly 40%. So you just reset the supply and demand curves. And the same thing is now happening in the delivery sector. January 1st of last year, there was the new delivery pay law that went into effect in the city of Seattle. And within a month, deliveries collapsed, right? You're seeing way fewer deliveries. You're having people that can barely get one or two, deliveries a day in the city of Seattle. Now you go out to the suburbs where this law doesn't have effect and everything's still normal, right? People are still making money, except people are starting to notice that people used to deliver in Seattle and now delivering out in the suburbs. So now there's fewer trips to go around. So it's kind of double-edged sword. Now, all this being said, I'm not against paying drivers more. I'm just against laws that are put into effect because a particular special interest group who has a lot of influence and power at City Hall pushed it through without much input or without being listened to by groups that didn't agree, whether that's driver groups, the companies themselves, otherwise. You have an overinflated price on rideshare in this town. It's bad for tourism. It's bad for the economy. It's bad for reducing drunk driving. It's bad for pedestrians. It's, I think it needs to be reformed. But we now have the law statewide. So to reform it, got to be done at the state. Good luck with that in a year where they're going to be worried about whether or not the Trump administration is going to cut their budgets because they're going to not get the dollars from the feds.
On top of a $12 billion deficit.
Well, yeah, we could talk about why that is. There's a structural imbalance in the state where you have just the sales tax and property tax. We have to, live on that as a state, and there's no income tax. Guess what? The state needs to look at an income tax. We've been needing an income tax in this state for a long, long time. And yeah, someone's going to say, oh, well, it's against the Constitution. Well, no, it's not against the Constitution. What's against the Constitution is having an income tax that's graduated, because taxes in the state have to be equalized. They have to tax equally.
What does that mean, that they have to be taxed equally?
It means that if you're going to say, let's put in an income tax, you can't say that, oh, if you make under $50,000, you get taxed at one rate, and if you make $1 billion, you get taxed at another rate. The rates of taxation have to be the same across the board.
So it has to be just the theory and the argument for a flat tax. Washington State would have to have a flat tax.
Washington State, by constitutional law, would have to have flat tax unless you amend the Constitution to allow for a not flat tax. Simple as that. Right?
Well, it isn't that simple because it hasn't been established yet.
Well, yeah. I mean, there were some bad court rulings that the current and the Supreme Court, Washington State Supreme Court, overturned. So it does allow for an income tax, just wouldn't allow for a graduated income tax where you have, different marginal tax rates based on income. So, technically the legislature could adopt a flat income tax of whatever percent they want, and everyone would have to pay it. It's just still regressive, but a hell of a lot less regressive than a sales tax.
Going back to situation that happened earlier, and this came up before the city council. It's really interesting. Obviously, the city council over the last 18 months has definitely changed in terms of its composition. And we have a number of new city council members there. And then surprisingly, here in November, Tammy Morales, who was seen as the last of the full-fledged progressives, unless you want to throw in the most recently elected Alexis Mercedes Rink. Miss Mercedes Rink came in late November after defeating Tanya Wu, and for one of the citywide positions, and they had a spirited campaign last summer, and Miss Rink, Councilmember Rink, won by a pretty sizable margin. That was not a close election. But having said that, Tammy Morales citing a variety of different issues, including no collaboration between the existing council members, her real enjoyment of the job, the way she was getting treated, not feeling a part of that city council. She decided to step down. That opened up the District 2 position. My longtime friend, and I know that you know him as well, Mark Solomon, was a number of candidates that applied for the position. They went ahead out of, I want to say it was 75 applications. The city council was able to come down to 8 candidates. Mark was selected out of those 8 candidates and ended up on the basis that he would be a what do they call it? He's a caretaker. Mark is the caretaker in the position, and a couple, I think, Adonis Duckworth, who actually had gone for the appointment, he has announced himself, or he's in the process of announcing himself as a candidate. I'm sure that there will be more there that will be going for it. But in cases like this, the Seattle City Council has played a major role. Seemed like there was more activists on the city council for a number of years. That has definitely changed. And we have some people who are a little bit more, I guess, technically pragmatic. If you look at Councilmember Moore, if you look at Councilmember Saka, if you look at Councilmember Rivera and different groups that have come in. But the bottom line issue is that the Seattle City Council has still, over the last, I want to say since they came in as this spirited group, has still faced a little bit of criticism, and some of it rightfully so. Some of it, I mean, is it's only been 12 months. But how would you categorize this current city council and some of the things that they've been trying to do?
I think when you have as much change in the city council as we did a year ago, it's going to take a while for that council to gel. It's going to take a while for that council to really get their feet under them. and really have a good understanding of what the underlying problems and issues that really need urgent addressing, and others that are really more long-term focused that you're going to need to be addressing, in a systemic way. And as much as I think that change needed to happen, I think we are getting to a point where I need to start seeing some results, right? I was pretty heavily involved through Drive Forward in attempting to get the delivery pay standard that went into effect at the beginning of last year revised to something that made a lot more sense. And that ended up ultimately not being successful because there were too many little parts that one or more city council person couldn't get behind. And so we ended up having a lot of different ways to get the 4 votes on the city council, but not a single way to get the 5, and definitely not 6. And that was exacerbated by some questionable politics that went on in terms of challenging at the time council member Wu's conflicts of interest because her in-laws owned a restaurant that did DoorDash deliveries. It's kind of weak sauce. But I get it. There are rules. That may have been the rule, and she didn't want to rock the boat. So we were really only dealing with 8 council members on this issue. So when you can only get 4 votes for any variety of different compromises, it just doesn't really work because people had other things. This was the very beginning of the year when they were first coming in. They'd barely finished all their sort of little council briefings on all the different departments that all of them oversaw. They were all, pretty fresh and green. And, it just didn't quite come together, which is unfortunate because now we've started to see some of the harms that have been done. We did some surveys before and after the minimum earnings standard of drivers who do delivery. And what we found when the original earnings standard was being negotiated back in 2020, 2021 during the pandemic, most drivers doing delivery were making right at minimum wage. Some were making a little bit below, but it never really was more than about 8% below minimum wage, right? We move forward to first quarter of 2024 and second quarter of 2024, we did more surveys. And what we found is that only drivers that worked highly part-time were going to make above Seattle's current minimum wage. So that's drivers working sort of 10 hours or less, pretty much only working dinner rush, every night, right? Drivers who were doing it full-time, they dropped to nearly 25% below minimum wage because there's no trips. There was no work. So how good is your earning standard if you've just caused people to get a pay cut? And when we explained this to council was like, yeah, we get it. So let's just do this. Why don't we just copy California was one thing, because California, it's minimum wage plus 20%. And I think it's 35 cents a mile. Great. Let's copy California. I'm all down for that. And the companies come in and say, well, we can't do California because California is different than Washington State. It's lower minimum wage and this costs too much money. We can't afford this. Well, too bad, companies. You need to pony up a little bit. And then there's the idea of, 10%. Well, as soon as we went to 10% over minimum wage, another councilman said, no, it's got to be 20%. Right. And then if you said, okay, well, we'll do 20%, then the council members that wanted it just minimum wage said, no, we can't do that. That's too expensive. But so it was just this constant sort of, no one could get behind a compromise. And I think that's a learning curve that new council members didn't quite understand, that someone somewhere, in order to get something done that was going to be the right thing to do, needed to get on board and compromise. I've seen a little more hopeful things, that people are a little more willing to compromise now, and I think that's starting to sink in. But it's it's a hard lesson. It's hard to take in when you're the one on the wrong end of the side.
Well, what gets criticized also, especially over the last, I want to say 7-8 years on the city council. Number one is the composition of the council, but number two, another thing, growing up here in Seattle, and obviously you grew up in Chicago, where you had an alderman system, and you had all those different aldermen who would show up to funerals, and they had such incredible they had such an incredible in tune. They had an ear in their district, their little district, and you had 49 aldermen in Chicago, I believe it is. But here in Seattle, we had a very, very interesting thing for the most part while I was growing up. We had city council members that were elected citywide.
Yep.
And I
was here for the tail end of that.
And the city council members that were there, it seemed to be, because that's an enterprising thing to run citywide. So I remember growing up with Jan Drago, and I had Jane Nolan, Sue Donaldson, Martha Cho, Sam Smith for so many years, who was replaced by Sherry Harris, an African-American lesbian woman, but who very, very pragmatic on all these different issues. And it seemed like the council had a completely different composition. It also had a completely different philosophy of working together. Then I can't remember what year that was. I mean, it was around 2010, 2012. They shifted to this district format, and the district seemed to make this a little bit easier in terms of lowering the bar, because the district is so much smaller. Number one, the amount of money that was necessary to run a race, you were not running citywide, you were running this district. But number two, the people that were attracted to the position, seems like you get more political activists out there. And I say that in a general sense, rather than a punitive sense, in the fact that you have more activists who are able to run instead of having to raise, and the numbers are probably just, anywhere from $500,000 to run for city council. You could raise $100,000 to $200,000 and be a legitimate candidate. This certainly changes the composition. And did that really change the structure of politics? And is this something that needs to be looked at in terms of who is on the council?
Yeah. Drawing that comparison to Chicago, I think is quite interesting because, you're right. 49 aldermen, right? So Chicago, the city of Chicago is a little over 3 million people, 49 aldermen. I did the math on this once, and I'm doing this from memory. I'd have to get out a calculator and do the math again, but I can't do that live on the radio here. But I'm pretty sure, I believe that the math works out. If you're going to have the same ratio of aldermen, city council people to population, move that from the city of Chicago into the city of Seattle, you'd be talking about having, I think it was either 13 or 15 city council people. Here's the fun part. We all think of Chicago as this big city, right? Geographically, Chicago is only a third larger than the city of Seattle, city limits. Population is almost 4 times, right? Three plus times, right? So denser, right? And so you have aldermen that have, some of the smallest wards are, 4 city blocks by 4 city blocks. Yeah, it's really easy to get to know everybody. You just hang out at the local bodega, right? And so, it's real easy. And yeah, there's also some corruption. There's also some machine politics. And there was a pay to play sort of system for a while in Chicago that if you wanted to be the alderman after the current alderman was dead, you paid to play. You donated to the mayor's campaign. You donated to the Democratic Party. You donated to the local, if you were in a Catholic neighborhood, local church. If you were in a Jewish neighborhood, the local synagogue. If you're in a Muslim neighborhood, the local, this is how it just worked. If you weren't seen as being an upstanding member of the community, you didn't have the right politics, and you didn't give out the right money, and you didn't donate to the right charities, you didn't get made alderman. We don't have that here. And that's good. That's very good, because it means an average person, one like you and I, can run for a city office. And I've thought about it before. I decided not to do it. Ran for Port Commission in 2013 instead. Lost, came in second place, but it was a good experience. Found out very quickly that the way you win a campaign is by outraising your opponent. And that's the only way you win your campaign, really. Spending 8 hours a day dialing for dollars is not very much fun. When you think of a campaign as when you walk into a campaign, you think, oh, I'm going to be out on the street knocking on doors, talking to people about policy and issues and this, that, the other. And then you realize that you're spending 8 hours a day dialing for dollars. Welcome to the American political system. So it takes away certain candidates right from the start, right? I'm never going to run for office again. That was an experience I'm glad I did. I never want to repeat.
Why do you say that?
I'm not going to want to spend 8 hours a day dialing for dollars. Simple as that. I don't mind going to all the parades. I don't mind knocking on the doors. I don't mind talking to voters. That's the fun part of it. But the money part, no, thank you. I wish we had more reform on campaign finance, but not getting that till we replace the Supreme Court. So for right now, not doing it again. Glad I did it. Enjoyed the time that I did it. I wish I could have run because, still believe I would have been a better choice than the person who did get elected. But there it is. So we look at the new city council. This new city council is more conservative than we've been used to in the past. Mm-hmm. And at some point, though, they have to get something done. Right.
Ultimately, that's the barometer, right?
And the reason they're there is the previous, more progressive city council didn't get the big issue solved, or at least didn't appear to get the big issue solved. In Chicago, one of the big things about being reelected as mayor, there's three things that everyone looks at. Did you pick up the garbage? Did you plow the streets? And did you appear to be doing something about crime? Didn't actually have to do something. You'd appear as if you were doing something about crime. You'd get reelected every time. That's how Mayor Daley 1 and 2 stayed in power for so long. Jane Byrne, Harold Washington. These people were in office for a long time, and now we've got a new guy who we've had changeover real quick in Chicago a couple times, and it's because they didn't do one of those three things.
It ultimately boils down to getting the job done. And so that's what most politicians are looked at. That's how we are looked at on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Did we get the job done? And that means going to a break at times. So we're going to take a break. We'll come back with Michael Wolfe in about 3 minutes on your community radio station, getting the job done at Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Rainier Avenue Radio, your community radio station will provide you with more information. Rainier Avenue Radio.
Sediment cleanup of the lower Duwamish River has begun. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the members of the Lower Duwamish Waterway Group, which includes King County, the City of Seattle, and Boeing, have begun sediment cleanup of the Lower Duwamish Waterfall Superfund site. This important environmental project will address sediment pollution and help restore the health of the Duwamish River. Starting in the waterway's upper reach, construction activities extend from the South 102nd Street Bridge down straight to the Duwamish Waterway Park. Over the next 3 years, in-water activities will occur from October to February, ending in February 2027. Visit ldwg.org to learn about the upper reach cleanup and sign up for email updates.
Hello, listener. What's important to you about what's going on in your community? Are you interested? Are you concerned? In any case, I invite you to tune into my show, Seattle Here and Now, on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Why? I will be covering a wide range of topics important to you and impacting the community. Each show will have a special guest or guests to share with you information on a variety of subjects that are happening here and now in Seattle. I promise I will work hard to make my show informative, interesting, and entertaining. Be sure to listen to Seattle Here and Now on Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Greetings. This is your host, DJ Neftali, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, the best DJ in the Seattle area. You can catch me every Monday at 8 p.m. on YouTube. Like I said, this is DJ Neftali, the best reggae in Seattle, Washington, the best radio station Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Come on, right?
A new law is helping people save more money on prescription drug costs. You may also be able to save with Medicare's Extra Help program. Your premium cost can be zero and your out-of-pocket expenses are low. Who should apply? Single individuals earning less than $23,000 a year or married couples earning less than $31,000 a year. Even if you don't think you qualify, you should still check out this program. Visit ssa.gov/extra help. Medicare costs are covered by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
I'm Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not hearing men compare women to residential real estate, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Ow. Ow.
TV radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Juan Cotto, Juan on Rainier. It's interesting. I am obviously to have your name on your own show. I'm a certain a part of egomaniac. However, it also is very, very weird to me because I guess it kind of reduces my egomania because that's kind of like weird saying that, Juan on Rainier. But indeed, this is Juan Cotto. I'm on Rainier Avenue Radio. I'm on Rainier Avenue, 4916 Rainier Avenue, south of the former Columbia. Actually, we still are the Columbia City Theater. And what an interesting place that we have here. This is where we host WIAA Prime Time. Mick Hoffman and I have a conversation about sports and athletics at the high school level, much deeper than just the scores and the people who are playing them. And we don't give you the rundown on who's going to school where. And then if you follow high school and college athletics nowadays, this whole conversation, it's another conversation that has gone way, they're not even a lot of high school seniors are not even getting recruited now because they can go to the junior colleges in the Division 2 and 3 levels and find players there. It's just absolutely crazy, and the amount of money that is being generated. And I'm a capitalist, and I think it's great, but I just wonder, and that's a conversation I'm sure I will have with someone else. Of course, we may go that direction in this next segment, but geez, I mean these dollars are just getting out of control for the NIL accounts, and we really look at this, and we also look at making sure that these programs at the high school level are designed at what they're supposed to do, really raise awareness in terms of education for our children's minds, body, and spirit. And Mick Hoffman, if you have sat and listened to him here on our show, he is certainly committed to that. So I hope you'll join us on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. to hear those conversations that we have. Then, of course, my man Daniel Bellis, 737 episodes of Fresh Juice. I mean, number one, that's a lot of wherewithal. And, sometimes I'm chilling on my phone at night and I'm scrolling. I have a thing on my desk, Michael, that says no scrolling. Stop scrolling, Juan. Don't scroll. And I'm scrolling on my phone and I'll bump across Fresh Juice. And they have some really dynamic conversations. To me, it is the best of community radio, and it's so much fun to hear Daniel and his folks talk about a variety of different topics. And they're a little bit younger generation than I am. However, I like to believe that I can connect with those generations. And I will say this, it's a lot of fun to listen to them. So check out Fresh Juice on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Michael, we were talking about the art of getting things done. All you need is 4 other people to come along with you to get your policy done at the city council. All you need is 4. You need to persuade 4 of the other 8, and you have 5 votes. Why does that seem like it's so difficult?
Everyone's got something. Everyone's got their pet thing that they want to get through, and they need support for that. And so sometimes someone is looking down the road at another thing they want to introduce and understand that, if I vote for this thing here, I'm going to make this constituency mad. And I already know I'm going to have this other thing that's coming down the pike that's already going to make this constituency mad. I don't want to make them mad twice. So I'm only going to do this one thing that I want to do. And I'm going to not do this other thing over here because I don't want to make this community mad twice, because then I'm definitely not going to get reelected.
But we have important issues. We have homeless. We have been We've been discussing the homeless issue for well more than a decade, and we can debate what has happened. And I'm reading more stories, and you read people's Facebook opinions, and still, people are saying that there's more people from outside of the city of Seattle who are homeless that have come to the city of Seattle because of our policies that are from the city of Seattle. You hear that whole argument and that whole debate. You hear our police force, Mr. Barnes, Chief Barnes, interim Chief Barnes, but soon to be Chief Barnes, has come in from Madison, Wisconsin. And I wonder how they sold him on this position in the wintertime. I mean, usually in Amazon, right? Amazon brings people in the summertime. They're very, very specific about bringing people to Seattle when it's hot, warm, and sunny, and the sun's going down at 10 o'clock at night. Mr. Barnes took this position in the wintertime. And I wonder how they displayed to him this police force, which I'm gonna go out on a limb here. I think it's safe to say that he's got his hands full with this particular police force. The last several chiefs had, and the mayor has, and this police force, and some of the behavior that comes out of this police force, some of the issues that have come out of this police force, have really costed mayors their positions. Mm-hmm. And they've got to deal with that. They've got to deal with a place that is inherently getting more and more difficult to build, and figure out ways that we can find opportunities to have housing on a public scale and or the private scale, to make sure that we have the housing that we need for a city that has exponentially grown over the last 25 years. Michael, how do you get anything done? What are the fundamentals to do so?
Look, I think there's a lot of good initiatives out there, especially when it comes to housing. I voted for the social housing initiative. I think that social housing initiative is a good idea, because at some point we've got to cut through and get something done. We got to build more housing, right? And as I pointed out a few minutes ago, Seattle geographically is pretty large, right? There's plenty of land to be able to do it if you're willing to densify some, right? And the problem is we have too many people here who are too entrenched in thinking that when you live in a global city, which we are, and I don't care if you've been living here for 50 years and you still want it to be 1962 and the World's Fair and little old Seattle with its monorail that stops at 2 places. Sorry, that's not who this city is anymore. This city is home to multiple Fortune 500 companies, a few Fortune 100 companies, and a few Fortune top 50, right? So guess what? We are a global city. You walk through SeaTac Airport right now in the International Arrivals Terminal, and you have flights coming in from all over the world every day. Thousands of people coming to visit our city every day. The Club World Cup comes here this summer. We're going to have tens of thousands of visitors coming to watch their favorite club soccer team play in the Club World Cup. People from Paris, people from Brazil, people from Madrid, all coming to watch play Seattle Sounders, right? And I'm going to be at every one of those damn games because I'm a huge Sounders fan. Let's go Sounders. Let's win a cup. Come on. Now, that being said, what does that have to do with homelessness? What does that have to do with building housing? Well, when you go look at some of these other larger cities that all these people are going to be coming from, they don't have a problem with going up in terms of density, in terms of building apartment buildings, in terms of having the zoning codes that allow for increased density. Now, are you going to put in a 50-story high-rise building right on the shore of Lake Washington, directly across from Seward Park? No, that doesn't make any sense. But should there be more high-rise buildings down, near the Othello Light Rail Station, the Rainier Beach Light Rail Station, Beacon Hill, some of the Judkins Park, where the new ones coming in right there on I-90? 100%. The problem is all of that land is being sold to for-profit developers, and those for-profit developers don't build affordable housing. They build housing at market rate. And the market rate here means that if you're not making $150,000 a year, you can't afford that apartment, right? That's a big number, considering that someone who's only making 10% more than minimum wage is only making $50,000.
This conversation here, and we've focused on the city council and the history of our country, the East Coast cities and the East Coast, they modeled their governments after our United States government with this strong executive branch, and this has to collaborate. These legislatures, and that swept across the East. Then you came to the wild West and the history of Western governments. People wanted to say something. Yeah, we weren't gonna set up these legislature. We weren't going to set up these executive branches with all the power. We were going to definitely give our legislators, and we're going to give our legislatures, and you see that here in the state of Washington, state of Oregon. I'm working in the state of Idaho on some issues, and it's not that the governors are weak, but they certainly aren't as strong as the governors as you move further and further east, which brings up the topic here in the city of Seattle. And we were talking about this strong legislative form of government that we have. We have Mayor Bruce Harrell, who lives here in the Rainier Valley area, and he certainly is a guy who we see on the streets. No matter what neighborhood you live in down here, the mayor is very visible, and he is on a first name basis with a number of us. And we get to see him, and we get to dialogue with him, and we sometimes get into healthy conversations with his honor. Categorize the mayor and the leadership that you feel that he has brought to some of these situations that are occurring with this particular city council.
I think he's been good overall. From my own personal standpoint, I've known his honor since I started getting involved in 37th district Democrat politics back in 2008, right? If we run into each other on the street, we are on a first name basis. However, that doesn't mean that we always agree on everything, and that doesn't mean that I'm not critical of him when I need to be critical of him. But
I think that's the way he wants it,
right? But I think overall, he has done a decent job of managing expectations, managing tough situations. I think it's hard for the mayor to control our city council, and it's hard for the city council to also do things that are against the wishes of the mayor, so to speak, right? So there's a balance here. There's a check and balance, and I think that's healthy. But when we look at the big issues, like homelessness, right, and affordable housing, nothing seems to get done. And it doesn't matter if it was Bruce Harrell or Jenny Durkin or Mike McGinn or even Greg Nichols. I know a lot of people like Greg Nichols, and some people, including myself, would say that maybe their vote in the primary after he got his own street plowed probably wasn't a great vote. But the idea here is we've got to build housing. We've got to find a way to build housing at affordable levels. And if that means the city itself has to start funding projects and building them themselves and contracting them themselves, then that's probably what needs to happen. But I don't see anyone doing that. And that was the whole point of some of the social housing movement, right? And the social housing initiatives is that we just need to start building them. We need to go out, we need to raise money, we need to spend money, and we need to build housing, right? The only way to get housing more affordable is to build more housing. It's supply and demand. If you put enough supply out there, the demand lessens, the prices go down. That's period. We learned this in macroeconomics in college, economics 101, right?
And that's what my friend, my former Patty Murray, I was the Western Washington coordinator. My brother, Scott Shapiro, in 1992, he was the Eastern Washington coordinator. He's become a developer. And he says the same thing. He says, Juan, that the private sector should be dealing with this.
But they can't. They won't.
We have, this should be based on the amount of inventory we have.
But the private sector is unwilling to build when they can't make a profit. And so if all you're doing is building housing at the high end and you're taking up available land to build new housing at the high end, then all you're doing is getting high end housing. It doesn't actually solve affordable housing. It's trickle down housing as opposed to trickle down economics, right? It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Otherwise, would we have an affordable housing problem right now? We've built thousands of new units in the city, all of them in those high rises down in South Lake Union that rent for $4,000 a month for a 1-bedroom. That's almost New York price, right? No one working at Rookies or Flying Lion Brewing, or they can't afford to live in something like that. They don't get paid that much. That doesn't solve the problem. Let's solve the problem. Let's build affordable housing. Now, what we can't do is what we did in the 50s and 60s and go off and build the Robert Taylor homes in Cabrini Green a la Chicago, right? That can't happen either, right? So we need to find that balance of being able to put affordable housing around the city so that people who work in different neighborhoods can get to their offices on foot, by bike, by other modes of transit that don't involve them owning a car either, which is also very expensive right now. This has got to get done. And I don't see, and I haven't seen for the last 20 years, anyone doing it. So social housing, let's do it.
We have approximately 12 minutes, and so I'm going to start rapid firing some questions. I want to get your opinions on this.
Great.
What would you tell new police chief Sean Barnes?
Rein in the racism. That's it.
Elaborate on that, please.
I mean, we've seen way too many problems with the Seattle police. I mean, how many police went down and got arrested in January 6th that came from the Seattle Police Department? I mean, that's it. It's simple as that. We got to look at the police department as actually, it says on every police car, to protect and serve. I think most of the police officers just look at the first word. They don't look at the second word. Serve. You are here to serve your community. Now, the problem is most of these police officers don't live in the community. And I understand Washington State doesn't allow for cities to require city employees to live in the community. Fine.
Would that help?
100%. Because then those people are shopping at the local stores every day. The store owners get to know them. The community gets to know them. They're a neighbor. They're, this, that, the other. City of Chicago requires every single employee of the city of Chicago to live in the city. Now, there are neighborhoods that are almost entirely firefighters and cops. That's fine. But we can't do that here, but we need to have them more involved in our community in some way so they understand some of the issues that face the community and why there might be certain problems in certain neighborhoods and who you need to talk to start getting those addressed. What community leaders can be brought in to help start conversations with some of the bad actors in the communities. This is community policing 101, which the Seattle Police Department has been resistant doing since I've moved here 20 years ago. That needs to be fixed.
I'm going to move this slightly over to the state, but I will tie it in with the homeless conversation. I know Representative Mia Gregerson's had some interesting legislation that she proposed down there looking at the protection of the homeless populations here in the Seattle area. What can we do? And I love the idea of these pragmatic solutions. What can we do to really come up with some ways that we can start to change this conversation around the homeless and giving these folks who are on our streets? And here, a couple of weeks ago, I mean, in extreme cold, we see people out there in tents, and it just doesn't seem human. What can we do to make sure that we are, number one, there's the aesthetic of it in any city, but also the humane part of it in any city. I mean, we all feel a need that we want to do something, and that's what our role of government is to help us do, is to come up with ways to solve these things that certainly seem just so inhumane at times. What can we do, and what are some of your thoughts in regards to the ways that we can start to handle the homeless here?
Well, I certainly do not agree with the new Housing and Urban Development Secretary of the federal government, or whatever his title is. I do not agree with RFK Jr. We should not have work camps for the homeless. But the reality is it's a hard issue because, you see the tent encampments, you see some of the open air drug markets, you see a lot of problems with this that are hard to address without addressing root causes of mental illness and drug addiction. And the more people that we can get, even if it's through the criminal justice system, the more people that we can get into programs where they do get treatment, where they do get supportive services, housing with those supportive services, the better off we're going to be. Now, the problem is that's not cheap. So we've got to figure out a way to look at our budget at the city of Seattle and even in the state and King County to say, okay, what are our values? Because your city budget is your statement of values. Your housing, but your own personal budget is your own statement of values, right? What do you spend your money on? Well, okay, let's think about this. What does the city of Seattle spend $7 billion a year? What does the city of Seattle spend on homelessness? What does it spend on treatment programs? What does it spend on mental health and wraparound services for that, right? Obviously, there are going to be people who just are going to refuse service, and there's not much you can do about that. But there's going to be a lot of people who will take that service if it meets them where they are, not demand that they go to this other place to get it, right? Not demand like some shelters do that you have to, be part of this worship service, or let's not tie some strings around it. Let's make this where we're meeting them where they are. Is that easy? No, but let's look at our budget. What can we change? What programs aren't working? Where can we get money to be able to, out of the $7 billion, to be able to put money where our values are? And I think everyone in the city of Seattle pretty much the same values that, treatment first. We're gonna have a very interesting city attorney's race this year.
Mm-hmm.
You
think so?
Oh, I think so.
You think so?
With
our guy right now in our district right here, Roy O'Sullivan.
Yeah.
He desperately wants to be elected to something.
He's been wanting to be elected to something for a while.
Long time.
But here's the thing. I think he's actually qualified for this, and I think he's got some good ideas. I think Ann Davidson isn't necessarily the right choice for Seattle. I didn't think she was the right choice for Seattle 4 years ago. And I know that Rory is looking at some of those programs to really try to get people who get into the criminal justice system to seek alternative ways of turning their lives around. Looking at drug courts and treatment courts and stuff like this, where you're going to go into treatment. Yes, you've committed a crime, and yes, you're going to have some punishment attached to it, but there's also going to be treatment. There's going to be rehabilitation. This country has lost the concept of incarceration as being a way to rehabilitate. It is only a way to punish now. And that doesn't help people when they come back out.
The governor of the state of Washington, he has recently sent out 2 very, very, very interesting emails from his communications director, Brianna Aho. I like to read these things and get to know the personalities who send me these emails. And one of them, he gave some workers, I think it was $87,000, if I'm not mistaken, for back pay that was owed to a case. Then I got an email today. There was $390,000 from some workers on a specific state program. They were entitled to back pay, and the governor's office was proud to say that they got these $390,000 back for these workers. And it led me to wonder, Michael, is our governor still in the attorney general's office, or is he? Is he finally,
if you spent 12 years, if you spent 12 years doing one thing, shifting those gears sometimes can take a little bit. But what has he been a governor for a month now?
Yes.
Yeah, let's cut the guy some slack.
Okay.
Here's the thing. I love Bob Ferguson as an AG. Anyone who's gonna do the job the way he did it as AG to make sure that he's protecting the rights of Washington State citizens against incursions from the federal government, particularly the Trump administration. I think he's got his head pretty squarely put on his shoulders. yeah, I want to see him be, looking a little less like an attorney general, a little more like an executive.
I talked to you earlier about it, Senate bill. I believe it's 5946, but I can check me on my math, ladies and gentlemen. We had a hearing down last week in Olympia to get the blood type, individual's blood type. And as you know, I'm the government affairs director at Bloodworks Northwest.
Yeah.
And we have two big bills in this session we're excited about. We have who were sponsored by Republicans, Paul Harris out of Vancouver, wonderful supporter of blood donation, someone who has the ability to reach across the aisle. Michael, we have the blood type on the driver's license. And I was wondering what is Drive Forward's thoughts and about getting drivers to donate blood and having that on there in emergency situations.
Before we came on air, Juan, we were talking about this briefly because I don't know a whole lot about it. And as far as I'm concerned, if your blood type's on your driver's license, it's not that much of an invasion of privacy. Every military person has their blood type on their dog tags, right? So there's a reason that's there. If it means the difference between saving someone's life because the doctor at the ER knows exactly what your blood type is, and maybe you don't come out of it okay because you didn't get the blood in time, I think that's a huge benefit. As we were talking, I said reference that we had talking earlier. I haven't given blood in decades because, as I mentioned earlier, I lived in the UK. In high school. I was in the 80s. That was in the height of the mad cow problems in the UK. And so, I always joke, people say, oh, you should go donate blood. I said, I can't. There's a whole bunch of crazy cows that have gotten to me. And now I guess that's not a problem anymore. So I'm ready to go down. I'm ready to give my pint and recommend that anyone else should go do it too.
Michael, just our last question is, you and I both talked earlier about what fascinated us with these types of conversations around public policy and politics and the interest level of it, especially amongst our youth. Obviously, your son is now, it shocked me when you told me he was 21 and he's over at George Washington University. But I remember
American University.
I'm sorry, American University. Over in Washington, D.C., and he's enjoying his time in the nation's capital. I have a 17-year-old football player in my house who eats everything, and we've had extensive conversations around the governance of our local and state and federal communities, and he's getting ready to make his decisions to leave. How do we continue to make sure that we get not only our children but our communities engaged in these conversations?
Invest in public schools. My son went to John Muir Elementary, Seattle Public Schools, Orchid K-8 for middle school, Seattle Public Schools. As a graduate of Franklin High School, he's a Quaker, for all you Quakers out there.
Quakers, maybe.
And he's going to American University, studying international relations. It's one of the top 10 schools in the nation for international studies, doing peace and conflict in the Middle East as his concentration in international relations. So the education system in this city can produce kids that can go on to do great things. We need to invest in that. The state needs to invest in that. The city needs to invest in that. The county needs to invest in that. The school board needs to invest in that. Closing schools isn't the solution. Investing in schools is the solution.
It is always so fun to talk to you. I've always admired your pragmatism. I've always enjoyed your ability to look at so many different sides, a complete 360 of a variety of issues when talking to you. It is too bad that and maybe those of us that are friends of yours will persuade you to potentially run for public office again. But I understand why you would not want to do that.
Not happening.
But it is always so fun to catch up, and I hope we can do this again because I think the issues are going to continue to be here for a while.
I think we've got at least 4 years.
Michael Wolfe, the executive director of Drive Forward, thank you so much for stopping by. And this is Juan Cotto on your community radio station. And I want to let everyone know that just want to say that it has been awesome. And I think this is my 7th year on your community radio station. It is the preeminent broadcast operation in the Rainier Valley. And I'm certainly looking forward to working with Tony B., Daniel Bellis, and this group to promote our issues in the community. I'm looking forward to making sure that all voices get heard And we look forward to making that a commitment that we carry on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio. Sign off and we'll see you next week on WIAA Primetime.